They mocked the homeless man at their wedding until he stood up and spoke. They threw breadcrumbs at him like he was some kind of animal, laughing as he sat quietly in the back corner of their million-dollar wedding venue. But when he finally stood up and spoke, the entire room went dead silent. Before I continue with this story, please consider subscribing to this channel as it helps us grow, and also comment which country you're watching me from. Thank you so much. Let me take you back to where this all began. Victoria Sterling had always gotten everything she wanted: designer clothes, expensive cars, a trust fund that could buy a small country. But there was one thing she wanted more than anything else: to marry into the Whitmore family. Old money so ancient it practically had cobwebs on it. So when James Whitmore III proposed with a ring worth more than most people's houses, Victoria thought she'd finally made it. The wedding was set to be the social event of the year, 500 of the city's elite, a venue that cost more per hour than most people made in a month, and enough flowers to fill a football stadium. But Victoria had a problem, a big, embarrassing problem that threatened to ruin her perfect image. 3 weeks before the wedding, as Victoria was getting her final dress fitting, her phone buzzed with a text that made her blood run cold. "Congratulations on your upcoming wedding, sweetheart. I'll be there to walk you down the aisle. Love, Dad." Victoria's hands started shaking. The seamstress noticed her suddenly pale complexion and asked if she was feeling all right, but Victoria just nodded weakly and excused herself to the bathroom. You see, Victoria had spent years crafting the perfect backstory. She told everyone that her parents had passed away tragically when she was young, leaving her with a substantial inheritance. It was cleaner that way, simpler, more sympathetic. The truth was far messier. Her father, Robert Sterling, had been a successful businessman once, but a series of bad investments, a toxic relationship with alcohol, and a gambling problem had cost him everything. Victoria had watched him spiral downward for years, begging her for money, showing up at her apartment at all hours, embarrassing her in front of friends and colleagues. When she turned 18, Victoria cut him off completely, changed her phone number, moved across the country, and told everyone he was gone. In her mind, he was. But now, somehow, he'd found her and he wanted to be at her wedding. Victoria immediately called the number he'd texted from, her heart pounding. "Dad, you can't come to my wedding," she said the moment he picked up. "Victoria, is that really you, sweetheart? You sound so grown up. I've missed you so much." "Dad, listen to me. You cannot come to this wedding. Do you understand me? I've built a life here and—" "I know about the Whitmores," he said softly. "I've been keeping track of you, even though you didn't want me to. I'm proud of you, Victoria. I know I messed up, but I'm your father. I should be there." Victoria felt tears of frustration building in her eyes. "You lost the right to call yourself my father a long time ago. If you show up, I'll have security remove you." There was a long pause. When her father spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "I understand why you're angry, but Victoria, I'm not the same man I was. I've been clean for 2 years now. I live in a shelter, but I'm getting back on my feet. I just wanted to see my little girl get married." Victoria hung up on him. But Robert Sterling wasn't the type of man to give up easily. Over the next 2 weeks, he called repeatedly, sent letters to her apartment, even showed up at her office building. Each time, Victoria had him escorted away by security. The final straw came 3 days before the wedding. Victoria was having lunch with her maid of honor and future mother-in-law at an upscale cafe downtown, when she spotted a familiar figure through the window. Her father was standing across the street, wearing a tattered coat that had seen better days, just watching her through the glass. Mrs. Whitmore noticed Victoria's sudden distraction. "Darling, you look like you've seen a ghost. Is everything all right?" Victoria forced a smile. "Just thought I saw someone I knew. Excuse me for just a moment." She rushed outside, her heels clicking angrily on the pavement as she approached her father. "I told you to stay away from me," she hissed, glancing around to make sure no one from the restaurant could see them. "Victoria, please, just 5 minutes. Let me explain." "Explain what? How you lost our house? How you chose alcohol over your own daughter? How you embarrassed me in front of every person I've ever cared about?" Robert's shoulders sagged. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'm trying to make amends. I've been going to meetings, I have a sponsor, I'm working at a soup kitchen." "I don't care," Victoria cut him off. "I don't care about your meetings or your sponsor or your soup kitchen. You're not part of my life anymore. You made that choice years ago." She turned to walk away, but her father's voice stopped her. "I'll be there anyway, Victoria, whether you want me there or not. You're still my daughter, and I'm not missing your wedding day." Victoria spun around, her eyes flashing with fury. "If you show up, I'll make sure you regret it." The day of the wedding arrived with perfect spring weather. The venue, an exclusive estate on the outskirts of the city, looked like something out of a fairy tale. White roses cascaded from every surface, a string quartet played softly in the background, and guests dressed in their finest clothes mingled on the perfectly manicured lawn. Victoria looked stunning in her custom-designed gown, her hair swept up in an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless. She felt like a princess, exactly as she had always dreamed. But as she was getting ready in the bridal suite, her maid of honor burst in with a panicked expression. "Victoria, we have a problem," she whispered urgently. "There's a man outside. He looks homeless. He says he's supposed to be here for the wedding, but he's definitely not on the guest list. Security is handling it, but I thought you should know." Victoria's heart sank. She walked to the window and peered through the curtains. There, being escorted away from the main entrance by 2 large security guards, was her father. He was wearing the same tattered coat she had seen him in days earlier. His hair was unkempt, and he carried a small, worn bouquet of flowers that looked like he'd picked them from someone's garden. But what broke her heart, even through all her anger, was the look on his face. He wasn't fighting the security guards or causing a scene. He just looked defeated. Victoria watched as they led him to the edge of the property, where a small wooded area provided cover from the main event. Her father didn't leave, though. He sat down on a fallen log, still clutching his little bouquet, and just waited. The ceremony began right on schedule. Victoria walked down the aisle alone, having told everyone that she preferred it that way, that it was more modern and independent. The guests didn't need to know the real reason. James looked handsome in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, and when Victoria reached the altar, he took her hands and smiled that charming smile that had won her over. "You look absolutely radiant," he whispered. The ceremony was everything Victoria had dreamed of. The minister spoke eloquently about love and commitment. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, and when James kissed her as his wife, the crowd erupted in applause. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle together, Victoria couldn't help but glance towards the wooded area where her father was sitting. She could just make out his silhouette through the trees, still there, still waiting. The reception was held in a massive tent that had been decorated to look like an enchanted garden. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, tables were adorned with centerpieces that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and a full orchestra played while guests dined on cuisine prepared by a famous chef. Victoria felt like she was floating. This was her moment, her perfect day, and nothing was going to ruin it. That's when she noticed some of the younger groomsmen whispering and snickering near the edge of the tent. "Did you guys see that homeless dude earlier?" one of them was saying. "He was trying to crash the wedding. Security had to throw him out." "Seriously? That's so weird. Who crashes a wedding?" "Maybe he was hoping to score some free food." A third one laughed. "Hey, should we mess with him? He's still out there just sitting in the woods like some kind of creep." Victoria's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" she asked, walking over to the group. "Oh, hey, Mrs. Whitmore," one of the groomsmen said with a grin. "We were just talking about this homeless guy who tried to crash your wedding. He's still hanging around outside. Want us to go tell him to beat it?" "No," Victoria said quickly. "Just Just leave him alone. He's not hurting anyone. But the groomsmen had already lost interest in her opinion. Come on, guys, let's go have some fun, one of them said, and they headed toward the exit. Victoria tried to follow them, but James caught her arm. Where are you going, beautiful? We haven't even had our first dance yet. James, those guys are going to... Victoria, relax. It's our wedding day. Let security handle whatever it is. Come dance with your husband. The music swelled and James led her onto the dance floor. As they swayed together, Victoria could see through the tent opening to where the groomsmen had disappeared into the woods. 20 minutes later, they returned, laughing hysterically. Oh man, that was hilarious, one of them was saying, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Did you see his face when we threw those dinner rolls at him? And when we poured that champagne on his head? He just sat there and took it like a beaten dog.
We should post the video online. Homeless man gets what he deserves, the third one laughed. Victoria felt sick to her stomach. Around them, other guests were starting to listen in and chuckle at the story. Someone even started a slow clap. Boys will be boys, Mrs. Whitmore said with an indulgent smile. Though perhaps we should call security to make sure he's actually gone now. No need, one of the groomsmen replied. We made it pretty clear he wasn't welcome. He got the message. But as the evening wore on, Victoria kept glancing toward the woods, and every time she looked, she could still see that familiar silhouette, still sitting there, now with his head bowed and his shoulders shaking. The reception continued with speech after speech from family and friends. James's best man told embarrassing stories about their college days. Victoria's maid of honor talked about how perfect they were together. Mrs. Whitmore gave a touching speech about welcoming Victoria into the family. Everything was going exactly as planned. That's when Victoria noticed him. Her father was no longer sitting in the woods. He was walking slowly toward the tent, his clothes damp and stained from the champagne and food that had been thrown at him. His hair was matted to his head, and he still clutched those wilted flowers. The groomsmen saw him first. "Are you kidding me?" one of them said loudly. "This guy just doesn't get the hint." "Should we call security?" someone asked. "Nah," another groomsman replied with a cruel grin. "Let's see what he wants. This should be entertaining." The crowd began to notice the commotion, and conversations died down as all eyes turned to the shabby figure approaching the tent. Victoria's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. She wanted to run to him, to tell him to leave before he embarrassed himself further, but she also wanted to disappear, to sink into the ground and never be seen again. Robert Sterling walked slowly into the tent, dripping wet and clutching his flowers. The orchestra stopped playing. The entire room fell silent. "Excuse me," he said quietly, his voice barely audible. "I don't mean to interrupt, I wanted to give these to the bride." He held up the small, sad bouquet of flowers. The groomsmen burst into laughter. "Did this guy seriously just walk into our wedding to give the bride some weeds?" one of them said. "Dude, those aren't even real flowers. They look like he picked them from a dumpster," another added. More guests began to chuckle. Someone whispered, "How did security miss this?" Victoria stood frozen as her father walked slowly toward her, his eyes fixed on hers. She could see the pain there, the hope, the desperate love of a parent who had lost everything but still wanted to give her daughter something on her wedding day. "Victoria, you look so beautiful, just like your mother did on our wedding day." The mention of her mother, who had passed away from cancer 3 years after Victoria cut contact with her father, hit her like a physical blow. "Sir, you need to leave," James said firmly, stepping between them. "This is a private event." "I know," Robert replied, not taking his eyes off Victoria. "I just wanted to give her these flowers and tell her how proud I am of her, how sorry I am for everything, how much I love her." "Security!"
Mrs. Whitmore called out sharply. But before security could arrive, one of the groomsmen decided to take matters into his own hands. "Listen, buddy," he said, grabbing the flowers from Robert's hands and throwing them to the ground. "Nobody wants you here. Nobody cares about your cheap flowers or your sob story. You're embarrassing yourself and everyone else." He pushed Robert backward, and the old man stumbled but didn't fall. "Just go back to whatever bridge you crawled out from under and leave these good people alone. You're nothing but a pathetic waste of space." The crowd was watching in stunned silence now, some looking uncomfortable but none speaking up. Robert looked down at his flowers scattered on the ground, then back up at Victoria. A single tear rolled down his cheek. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll go." He turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back one more time. "Victoria," he said, his voice stronger now, "I know you hate me. I know I failed you as a father, but I want you to know something." The room was dead silent. "I want you to know that every day for the past 6 years, I've carried a picture of you in my wallet. Every day, I've wondered how you were doing, if you were happy, if you ever thought about me. And every day I've regretted the choices I made that drove you away." His voice was getting stronger, more confident. "I came here tonight not to embarrass you or cause a scene. I came here because I wanted to see my daughter on the most important day of her life. Because no matter how much I messed up, no matter how much you hate me, you're still my little girl." Victoria felt tears streaming down her face now, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I don't deserve to be in your life, but I want you to know that everything I did wrong, every mistake I made, it was never because I didn't love you. I loved you too much, and I was too proud to ask for help when I needed it." The groomsman who had pushed too earlier was getting impatient. "Okay, we get it, you're sorry. Now get lost before we make you sorry." He raised his hand as if to push Robert again. But Robert didn't back down this time. He stood up straighter, his eyes flashing with something Victoria hadn't seen in years: dignity. "You know what, son?" Robert said, his voice clear and strong. "You can mock me all you want. You can throw food at me, pour drinks on my head, call me names. But don't ever, ever tell me I don't have the right to love my daughter." The groomsmen were taken aback by the sudden change in Robert's demeanor. "You know, I may not have money," Robert continued, his voice rising. "I may not have a fancy house or expensive clothes or a trust fund, but I have something that none of you seem to understand. I have the courage to admit when I'm wrong. I have the strength to keep fighting even when everything seems hopeless. And I have the love of a father who would walk through fire for his child, even if that child doesn't want him to." The room was utterly silent now. Even the groomsmen had stopped laughing. "You want to know who I am?" Robert asked, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm Robert Sterling. I used to own Sterling Construction, the company that built half the buildings in this city, including the office complex where my daughter works. I employed over 200 people and had contracts worth millions of dollars. I was somebody once. I had everything you people think matters: money, status, respect. And I lost it all, because I was too proud to ask for help when I needed it, too ashamed to admit I had problems, too stubborn to let the people who loved me help me through the darkest time of my life." Robert reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it he extracted a faded photograph: Victoria at her high school graduation, smiling and wearing her cap and gown. "This is what I've carried with me every day for 6 years," he said, holding up the photo. "Through every night in a shelter, every day looking for work, and every moment when I wanted to give up, this picture reminded me that I had a reason to keep going, to keep trying to become the man my daughter deserved to have as a father." Victoria was sobbing now, her carefully applied makeup running down her cheeks. "I came here tonight to give you flowers that I picked from the community garden where I volunteer. They're not expensive, but they're grown with care and love just like I tried to raise you." He bent down and carefully gathered up the scattered flowers, straightening the broken stems as best he could. "I came here to tell you that I've been sober for 847 days. That I have a job now. I clean offices at night, including the building where you work. That I've been saving money to pay you back for everything I took from you when I was sick." The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. "And I came here to tell you that no matter what happens, no matter if you never want to see me again, I will always be proud to be your father, because you turned out to be everything I dreamed you could be. Strong, successful, beautiful, and independent." Robert walked back toward Victoria, who was standing frozen in the middle of the room. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said softly, holding out the damaged bouquet. "I don't expect you to let me back into your life. I just wanted you to know that your father loves you, and that I'm sorry it took me so long to become the man you needed me to be." He placed the flowers gently on a nearby table and turned to leave. That's when Victoria finally found her voice. "Dad," she whispered. Robert stopped walking, but didn't turn around. "Dad, wait!" Victoria took a shaky step toward him, then another. Then suddenly she was running across the tent in her wedding dress, not caring that she was probably ruining it. She threw her arms around her father from behind, sobbing into his damp coat.
"I'm so sorry," she cried. "I'm so sorry I gave up on you. I'm so sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm so sorry I was ashamed of you." Robert turned around in her arms, and for the first time in 6 years, father and daughter embraced. "I missed you so much, Dad," Victoria sobbed. "I missed you every single day, but I was too angry and too hurt to admit it." "It's okay, sweetheart," Robert whispered, stroking your hair. "It's okay. I understand why you did what you did. I don't blame you for any of it." The room was still silent, but now it was a different kind of silence. Guests were wiping their eyes, and even some of the groomsmen who had been taunting Robert earlier looked ashamed. Victoria pulled back and looked at her father's face, really looked at him for the first time in years. "You look good, Dad," she said through her tears. "Healthier than I've seen you in a long time." "I feel good. For the first time in years, I feel like myself again, like the man I used to be, the father you deserved." Victoria picked up the flowers he'd brought and held them close to her chest. "These are beautiful. They're the most beautiful flowers I've ever received." James appeared at her side, looking confused and a little overwhelmed by everything that had just happened. "Victoria, is this—" "James," Victoria said, wiping her eyes and standing up straighter. "I'd like you to meet my father, Robert Sterling." Robert extended a weathered hand to his new son-in-law. "I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances. I hope you can forgive an old man for wanting to see his daughter get married." James looked at the hand for a moment, then at Victoria, then back at Robert. Slowly, he reached out and shook it. "It's nice to meet you, sir," James said quietly. "Victoria, why didn't you tell me your father was— why didn't you tell me he was alive?" Victoria looked around the room at all the faces staring back at them, some sympathetic, some judgmental, some simply curious. "Because I was ashamed," she said, her voice growing stronger. "I was ashamed that my father had problems. I was ashamed that he lost everything. I was ashamed that he wasn't perfect like everyone else's parents seemed to be." She looked directly at Mrs. Whitmore, who was watching the scene with a carefully neutral expression. "I created this whole story about being an orphan because I thought it would be easier. I thought people would judge me less if they felt sorry for me instead of knowing the truth." She turned back to her father. "But I was wrong, Dad. I should have been proud of you for fighting your way back. I should have been proud of you for getting sober, for getting your life together, for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on you." Robert was crying now, too, tears streaming down his face. "Victoria, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do,"
she interrupted. "I do have to say this in front of everyone." She looked around the room again. "My father isn't perfect. He made mistakes. But he's here, he's sober, he's working hard to rebuild his life, and he loves me enough to sit outside my wedding all day just for the chance to congratulate me." Victoria's voice was getting stronger, more confident. "And you know what? I'm proud of him. I'm proud that he had the courage to get help. I'm proud that he didn't give up. I'm proud that he came here tonight, even knowing he might not be welcome." She looked at the groomsmen who had tormented her father earlier. "And I'm ashamed of anyone who would mock someone for being down on their luck. I'm ashamed of anyone who would throw food at a person and think it was funny. I'm ashamed that I allowed people to treat my father that way and didn't stand up for him." The groomsmen were looking at the ground now, clearly uncomfortable. Victoria walked over to where her father's flowers lay on the table. She picked them up and held them high. These flowers may not be expensive, but they were given with love, real love, the kind of love that doesn't care about money or status or what other people think. She looked at James, who was still trying to process everything that had happened. "James, I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know I lied to you about my family, and I understand if you're upset about that, but this is who I am. My father is part of who I am, and if you can't accept that, then maybe we made a mistake." The tent was so quiet you could hear the wind rustling through the trees outside. James looked at Victoria for a long moment, then at Robert, then back at Victoria. Slowly he said, "Victoria, the woman I fell in love with is kind, compassionate, and strong. The woman standing in front of me right now, defending her father and admitting her mistakes, is all of those things and more." He walked over to Robert and extended his hand again. "Mr. Sterling, I would be honored to have you as my father-in-law, and I apologize for the way you were treated tonight. That was unacceptable, and it will never happen again." Robert shook his hand gratefully. "Thank you, James. You're a good man. Victoria chose well." Victoria was crying again, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. "Dad, I know we have a lot to work through. I know it's going to take time to rebuild our relationship, but I want you to know that I forgive you, and I hope you can forgive me." "There's nothing to forgive, sweetheart. You did what you thought you had to do to protect yourself. I understand that." Victoria walked over to the microphone that had been set up for speeches. "Excuse me, everyone," she said, her voice echoing through the tent. "I know this evening hasn't gone quite as planned, but I want to say something." The room fell silent again. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with James and me, but I also want to apologize. I want to apologize for lying about my family, for creating a false story about my background, and for allowing my father to be treated poorly tonight." I took a deep breath. "Most of all, I want to thank my father for showing me what real courage looks like. It takes courage to admit when you're wrong. It takes courage to keep fighting when everything seems hopeless, and it takes courage to love someone even when they push you away." She looked out at the crowd of guests, many of whom were wiping their eyes. "My father isn't perfect. He taught me tonight that love isn't about having the perfect family or the perfect life. Love is about showing up even when it's hard. Love is about never giving up on the people that matter to you, and love is about having the strength to forgive and the courage to try again." She walked back to where her father was standing and took his arm. "Dad, would you do me the honor of dancing with me? I know we missed the father-daughter dance earlier, but maybe it's not too late." Robert's face lit up with joy. "I would love nothing more, sweetheart." The orchestra began to play a slow, beautiful waltz, and Victoria and her father stepped onto the dance floor. She didn't care that her dress was wrinkled, or that her makeup was ruined, or that half the room had seen her have an emotional breakdown. All she cared about was that her father was here, he was sober, he was trying to make amends, and she finally had the courage to let him back into her life. As they danced, Robert whispered in her ear, "I'm so proud of you, Victoria. Not because of your success or your money or this fancy wedding. I'm proud of you because of the woman you are, the woman you just showed everyone you can be." "I learned from the best, Dad," Victoria whispered back. "You taught me that it's never too late to start over. You taught me that love is stronger than pride, and you taught me that family isn't about being perfect, it's about being there for each other." When the song ended, the entire room erupted in applause, but Victoria barely heard it. She was too busy hugging her father and feeling, for the first time in 6 years, like her family was whole again. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of emotional conversations, heartfelt apologies, and new beginnings. Robert was welcomed by the other guests, many of whom admitted they'd been moved by his speech and ashamed of their earlier behavior. Mrs. Whitmore, to her credit, approached Robert personally to apologize for the way he'd been treated and to welcome him to the family. James spent time with his new father-in-law, learning about his background in construction and his current efforts to rebuild his life. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Victoria found herself sitting with her father on a quiet bench outside the tent. "Dad, I want you to know that this isn't just a one-night thing. I want you back in my life. I want us to work on rebuilding our relationship." "Are you sure? I know it won't be easy. There's a lot of hurt to work through." "I'm sure," Victoria replied firmly. "You've done the hard work of getting sober and rebuilding your life. The least I can do is meet you halfway." Robert smiled, and for the first time Victoria could see the father she remembered from her childhood, the man who used to build sandcastles with her at the beach, who taught her how to ride a bike, who read her bedtime stories every night. "There's something else," Robert said quietly. "I mentioned earlier that I've been saving money to pay you back. It's not much, only about $3,000 so far, but I want you to have it." "Dad, no," Victoria protested. "Keep that money. You need it more than I do." "Victoria, I need to do this. I need to start making amends in concrete ways, not just words. Please, let me do this for you, for us."
Victoria thought about it for a moment, then had an idea. "Okay, Dad, but I have a condition. I don't want you to give me the money. I want you to keep saving it, and when you have enough, I want us to use it to start a foundation together." "A foundation?" "A foundation to help other people in situations like yours, people who are struggling with addiction, who are homeless, who need a second chance. We'll call it the Second Chance Foundation." Robert's eyes filled with tears again. "Victoria, that's beautiful. I would love nothing more." "Good," Victoria said, standing up and smoothing down her wedding dress, "because I think we both learned something tonight. We learned that everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, and everyone deserves to have someone who believes in them." She looked back at the tent where her new husband was talking with the remaining guests. "You know what, Dad? This turned out to be exactly the wedding I needed, even though it wasn't the wedding I planned." "How so?" Victoria smiled, and for the first time all evening it was completely genuine. "Because it was real. It was honest, and it showed me what's really important, not the flowers or the dress or the fancy venue. What's important is having the people you love beside you, supporting you through the hard times and celebrating you through the good times." Robert stood up and hugged his daughter one more time. "I love you, Victoria. Thank you for giving me another chance." "I love you too, Dad. Thank you for never giving up on me." As they walked back toward the tent together, Victoria couldn't help but smile at the thought of all the people who would witness their reunion tonight. Some had been moved to tears, others had been forced to confront their own prejudices, and a few had probably learned something about the power of forgiveness and second chances. But more than anything, Victoria was grateful. Grateful that her father had had the courage to show up, grateful that she'd found the strength to admit she was wrong, and grateful that love really could conquer pride, fear, and years of hurt. 6 months later, Victoria and her father would officially launch the Second Chance Foundation, providing housing assistance, job training, and counseling services to people struggling with addiction and homelessness. The foundation would be funded not just by Robert's savings, but by donations from many of the wedding guests who had been inspired by his story. But that night, as Victoria and James left for their honeymoon with Robert's blessing and a promise to stay in touch,
All Victoria could think about was how a day that had started as the perfect fairy tale wedding had turned into something much more valuable. A real story of redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter. Sometimes, the best gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages, and sometimes, the people we're most ashamed of turn out to be the ones who teach us the most about courage, love, and what it really means to be family. What would you have done if you were in Victoria's shoes? Would you have had the courage to stand up for your father, or would the pressure to maintain appearances have been too strong? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this powerful story of redemption and second chances. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your time.